Da 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 da. Jalon Daniels, the starting quarterback for Kansas, is now doubtful for the game with the shoulder injury from that TCU game. This is obviously a huge loss because, one, it's your starting quarterback. And you're going on the road against Oklahoma, who is desperately needing the first conference win. And right now, they're favored by 8.5. Part of it's got to be because of the injury, but Jason Bean is good, but not as good as Jalon Daniels. And Oklahoma's defense is bad. But Oklahoma's defense is bad, though, when you look at the numbers. I mean, they allow 235.5 passing yards per game and 214.5 rushing yards per game. That's a problem. And even if Dillon Gabriel plays for Oklahoma, who's going to be better on defense? But I will say Kansas's defense is not the best either by any stretch of the imagination, because they have allowed 275.5 passing yards per game, but they only allow 120.3 rushing yards per game. If Dillon Gabriel plays in this game, this is by far the best quarterback they'll play against up to this point, if we're being honest. And to explain statistically the loss for Jalon Daniels, it's pretty big because he had 78 completions for 117 attempts for 1,072 yards with 11 touchdowns and 1 interception. He also is the second leading rusher on 53 rushing attempts for 335 yards with 5 touchdowns. That's a dual threat. I mean, and Jason Bean, he did pretty good last game against TCU, so TCU's defense and Oklahoma's defense statistically is about the same. So we'll see. And I know Jason Bean only had 12 rushing attempts on the year for 53 yards with 1 touchdown. But you got to keep in mind, the same thing goes for the passing yards, that he had the majority of that last week against TCU when they lost to TCU. I do know that the following game is Baylor and Waco at 11 a.m. either ESPN or ESPN2. And then there's a bye week. Whether or not Jalon Daniels is going to play against Baylor, we'll have to wait and see, because who knows at this point. Jason Bean had 16 completions out of 24 attempts for 262 yards with 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. That's off the bench. But he only had 7 rushing attempts for 37 yards though which is not bad. So he's not like a horrible backup by any means for Oklahoma's defense to deal with. I just have questions about their defense right now. Would I be shocked if Kansas loses this game? Absolutely not. Because it's on the road, like I said, and if there is Dillon Gabriel for the game. But you got to keep in mind, concussions are not like a 1 week thing and you're back. You're out 1 week and then you're back. Because, look, Tate McWilliams from Baylor has dealt with that since the BYU game when he got hit helmet to helmet in the first half. And he's still been out. And Tua's hit could be long. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa. I know that's an NFL related thing, but that could be 4 to 6 weeks on that. And supposedly I heard that from a doctor that somebody asked, a West Virginia fan did ask, that C.J. Johnson's thing is 4 to 6 weeks potential. The last thing you need to do is rush a guy too quick off of a concussion. So I don't know whether or not even that guy's going to even play in this game, Dillon Gabriel. You can't assume that. Luckily, there's a bye week after the Baylor game, but They host Oklahoma State at home. I would hope by then Jalon Daniels is going to be back by that game, but we'll have to wait and see. But Oklahoma State's pass defense is bad. So, and it's a home game. Then they go on the road to Texas Tech. And then they host Texas. And remember, Texas lost to Kansas last year in Austin in overtime. And then they got Kansas State at Kansas State at the very end of the season. I just think we're going to just have to monitor on this situation for Daniels here. And I really do think Kansas is going to have to slip up somewhere else in the conference. I don't see them winning out, period. I just think every team in the Big 12 is going to have at least 2 losses this year in conference. It's just because of the parity of the league is that good this year. Anyways, I just want to break that news down and explain their schedule from here on out, starting with this Saturday and onward. And on that list of games, I will say Baylor's a good defense. Kansas State is definitely a good defense. I wouldn't say Texas Tech is necessarily terrible, but Texas is better. I mean, they only allow 212 passing yards per game and 126.2 rushing yards per game. For now, those numbers could change. And I know definitely Texas Tech gives up a lot of I thought they give up a lot of passing yards per game, but let me check the numbers. Yeah, they allow 220.5 passing yards per game, but 146.5 rushing yards per game. So not like terrible, but not great either. And obviously Oklahoma State I'm familiar with statistically because I even predicted before going into the TCU game for Oklahoma State that their defense is shaky right now. They're beatable. I mean, 304 passing yards per game allowed. That's a ton of yards. But they only allow 118.8 rushing yards per game. It's just a pass defense. So, there you go. There's all the numbers that you need to know. And of course, as of right now, Baylor allows 96.9 rushing yards per game, and once we get to next week, the stats will update, of course. So, and 223.2 passing yards per game. So, I just want to give an FYI on that injury and what their schedule is looking like going forward. And to me, Kansas and Oklahoma take the over. That's one play I would suggest because the over for this game against Oklahoma is, trying to look at the number here, is 62.5. I think there's going to be at least 32 or 35 points scored on each side. I just want to break the news down. Like I said, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into 400 subscribers and more by the end of this year.